Hi, you are watching Revenge of Reddit. My girlfriend's best friend filled her head with the idea of taking a break from the relationship. My girlfriend told me, either you accept the break or this is over. And now she's crying, saying she made a mistake. Does anyone know where that nonsense about taking a break even came from? What happened to the usual thing? Just deciding when you don't want to be with someone anymore. To me, a break is nothing more than an excuse to cheat, but with permission. In my case, it all started at a little get-together of my girlfriend's friends at my apartment. My girlfriend's name was Raquel, and at that point, we'd been together for a bit over 3 years. We had already gone through the stage of getting to know each other, of figuring out what each of us wanted, and I thought we were at the point of starting to see if we fit into each other's future. That's how I saw her. I won't say I was already thinking of her as my wife or the mother of my children. Nothing that exaggerated yet. But I did see her as someone with whom I could build something real. With that idea, we had even started talking about moving in together. We didn't have a set plan yet, but both of us seemed sure that was the next step. That meant we were spending a lot of time at each other's places, planning, arranging routines, as if we were already testing what living together would be like. It was in that context that Raquel decided to host a small gathering with her friends, and I ended up being the host. She took care of inviting them, and I did my part. Bought food and drinks, got everything ready to make them comfortable. That night, there would be 3 women in total: Raquel, her best friend Beatrice, and Beatrice's sister, Cassandra. Everything started out fine. I was in the kitchen preparing some pasta while they settled in the living room. You can imagine how it is when there are several women and just one man. They laughed, teased me a bit, but all in a friendly way, happy to be treated well. Later, I joined them for dessert because they insisted. We were chatting about random stuff, laughing, when by pure coincidence, I asked Beatrice about Marcos, her boyfriend. He and I had gotten along well the few times we'd met, so I asked just out of curiosity. Maybe none of this would have happened if Beatrice had just answered something simple, like, Marcos is working. But no. What she said was that the 2 of them had taken a break. That word stopped me cold. I was about to get up and leave them alone, but when I heard it, I turned back toward her. I asked what exactly she meant by a break. Completely calm, Beatrice explained that she just wanted to know if Marcos was really the one for her. That's why she was exploring other options. She said it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. At that moment, her sister Cassandra looked at her in surprise and said she hadn't told her any of that. She asked directly if Marcos was okay with it. Beatrice hesitated, and then said that she'd had to convince him a bit. But yes, he had accepted. I couldn't wrap my head around it, so I asked if that meant they'd broken up. To me, taking a break was basically the same as breaking up. She shook her head and said no. They were just on a break, nothing more. After the break, they'd get back together like before. I wasn't convinced. I pressed her. You just said you're seeing other options to know if Marcos is right for you. What happens if you find someone more suitable? How is that break supposed to work then? Beatrice replied without hesitation, almost arrogantly. She said that wouldn't happen. But even if it did, in the worst-case scenario, if she met someone better for her, the logical thing would be to stay with that person. Cassandra was staring at her, clearly not understanding. She repeated the question. Are you sure Marcos agreed to that? Beatrice was starting to get annoyed. She answered sharply, saying that what she and her boyfriend did was their business, that they didn't owe anyone explanations or judgments. Throughout that whole conversation, my girlfriend Raquel didn't say a word. She stayed quiet, just listening. I decided there was no point continuing the argument, so I dropped it. Later, when they left, Raquel didn't mention anything about what had been discussed, and neither did I. But over the next few days, I started noticing Raquel acting strange, more thoughtful than usual, as if something were gnawing at her from the inside. She was quieter, sometimes distracted, and in conversations her replies became shorter. A few nights later, while we were at her apartment after dinner, she told me she'd been talking with Beatrice. Just hearing that made me tense up, because I already knew where this was going. Raquel told me that Beatrice had explained more about what a break meant. According to her, it was a way to give the relationship some air, to confirm whether you were really with the right person. And somehow, that idea made sense to her. Right then, I cut her off. I didn't let her keep talking. I told her not to even think about us taking a break, that I didn't agree and I wouldn't accept it. I was clear. If she didn't want to be with me anymore, she could just say it to my face, but I wasn't going to accept that made-up nonsense. She immediately got defensive. She said she was only telling me what she had talked about with Beatrice, that I didn't need to react like that. But I was already in a bad mood. I got up and went back to my apartment, angry, with the feeling that something had broken between us, even if I couldn't name it yet. The next day, I called Marcos to hear his side of the story, and that conversation made everything clear. According to Marcos, Beatrice had started with that whole taking a break nonsense shortly after she told him that a new guy had arrived at her job and that she found him fun to be around. He said that's when the argument started, because she kept insisting on taking a break, but he refused again and again. He wasn't willing to accept something like that. So she gave him an ultimatum. Either he agreed to take a break, or they were done for good. That was the limit for Marcos. He told me he looked her straight in the eyes and said she could do whatever she wanted, not as acceptance, but as someone who didn't want to waste any more energy arguing. For him, that was the end. But in Beatrice's head, she took it as a sign that he had accepted the break. Before hanging up, Marcos told me something that stuck with me. She'll realize what happened when she tries to come back. I just won't be there by then. That confirmed what I had suspected. Everything had started because of Beatrice's nonsense. Her sister Cassandra couldn't believe it, and rightly so. But what hurt me most was realizing Raquel, my girlfriend, wasn't as stable or self-aware as I had thought. Because that same day, she called me and said she needed to talk about something very serious. We agreed to meet at my apartment, and so we did. Raquel arrived looking solemn, very serious, though curiously she brought food. I suppose she thought everything would go as she had planned, and afterward we'd eat calmly together. I let her in, and as soon as we sat down, she said she had been thinking a lot about our relationship. She didn't waste time getting to the point. She said she needed to be sure of her feelings toward me. It was obvious what she meant. But when I was about to reply, she raised her hand. She asked me to let her finish this time, since I hadn't let her the previous day. I looked at her, held back my anger, and let her talk. I wanted to hear just how far her excuses would go. She said she loved me, that she saw a future with me, but that she wasn't sure she was making the right decision. That's why she needed a break, not to end things, but to explore all her options. I listened calmly and asked her something very specific. And these options, are you planning to start looking for them now, or do you already have someone in mind? She looked at me, confused, so I made it clearer. I'm asking if you already know who you want to sleep with, or if you're just about to start looking. Raquel turned bright red. She tried to defend herself, saying that the problem with men was that we always reduced everything to sex. I cut her off again, coldly. So, you're saying you don't plan on sleeping with anyone else during this break? She blushed again and hesitated. Then she said that if the situation came up, she couldn't promise it wouldn't happen. That's when I asked her the same thing I'd asked Beatrice. And if you find someone better than me, what will you do? She started shaking her head like I didn't understand. It's not that, she said. I don't want to leave you. I just want to see my options, that's all. And then she said, very clearly, so I'm telling you now, I want us to take a break." This time, it was me who shook my head. "I refuse," I said. "I don't want that." We sat there, staring at each other in silence. I already sensed what was coming, because I figured she'd use the same move as Beatrice, and I wasn't wrong. She lowered her head, as if it genuinely hurt to say what she was about to say, and whispered, "I'm sorry that you're not able to understand me. I'll have to be more direct. Either we take a break, or this is over." "All right," I replied steadily. "Then it's over." She looked at me and smiled, as if she thought she'd won. "So you accept the break," she said. "I promise this will make us stronger." "No," I interrupted her. "I agree with ending the relationship." "Thank you for coming. You can leave now." I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. Raquel froze, not knowing what to do. I guess she'd never imagined that I would actually reject her ultimatum. Suddenly, she broke down. She started crying and saying I wasn't understanding her. "But I don't want to break up. I don't want to throw away our relationship," she kept sobbing. "It's a shame," I told her, "because we're already done." I took her by the arm and walked her out of my apartment. She screamed, "We can't break up!" But I shut the door while saying, "Goodbye, and thank you." She stayed outside for a while, knocking on the door. Then she flooded my phone with messages and calls until I finally blocked her. The next day she came back again, saying she'd changed her mind, that she'd thought it through, and that we should just pretend she'd never said any of it. I simply repeated that we were done, and it was time to move on. That's when she told me everything. She confessed that it had been Beatrice's idea. Beatrice had told her to threaten me with breaking up, because that way I would give in and do whatever she wanted. But Raquel admitted she'd been wrong, that she now realized her mistake, and she begged me to forgive her. I told her she should have found out the truth about Beatrice before following her advice. Then I asked, "Do you really think Marcos is waiting for her to finish sleeping with her coworker so he can take her back with open arms? Are you really that naive?" Raquel stared at me with her mouth open. "How do you know about Beatrice and the guy from work?" she asked. I just laughed. "You'll see. Beatrice will end up in the same situation as you." And I closed the door again. On the third day, I got another visit. But this time, it wasn't Raquel. It was Beatrice. She looked awful. As soon as I opened the door, she started asking what Marcos had told me because he wasn't answering her or talking to her anymore. Knowing Beatrice and her dramas, I didn't even let her in. I told her right there at the door what Marcos had said, that he wasn't interested and wasn't planning to wait for her. Now both Beatrice and Raquel are out there making a big scene, crying that nobody understands them. At least Raquel hasn't made public what she tried to pull. But Beatrice is running around telling everyone that Marcos lied, that he agreed to the break, and now he's pretending otherwise. Of course, no one believes her. The only thing that still puzzles me is where this whole idea of taking a break even came from. Beatrice was always a bit dramatic, but she seemed to have a stable relationship with Marcos. Maybe someone else filled her head with that revolutionary idea of pausing a relationship. What I do know for sure is that I'm not playing those games. I'd rather end things once and for all than sit around waiting to see if someone finds better options than me. Update 1. I thought I'd never write anything more about this story, but here I am. It's been a little over 5 months since I posted it, and to my great surprise, Raquel and Beatrice reappeared in my life. During these months, Raquel kept insisting that it had all been a mistake and that we could still save our relationship. She looked for me a few more times and even tried to talk to my mother to convince her to make me give her another chance. But I had already told my family everything in full detail, so they didn't even let her inside the house. After that, since I had her blocked everywhere, I didn't hear from her again. I thought she'd finally accepted it and understood that there was no going back. On the other hand, my friendship with Marcos got stronger. He called me after everything that happened, and as I mentioned before, we'd always gotten along well. So we started hanging out occasionally for some beers. Before I knew it, we were meeting every week just to talk and unwind. That's how what I'm about to tell began. One night, Marco said he'd bring a couple of female co-workers so we could all go out together and have a good time. We met at a bar. The girls turned out to be sisters who, somehow, both worked at the same company. The night went great. None of us were looking for anything serious, just to have fun. We laughed, we drank, and for the first time in a long while, I genuinely felt like I was having fun again. We promised to meet up again sometime. The sisters got into their car and left. Marcos and I stayed in the parking lot chatting and saying goodbye when suddenly Beatrice appeared out of nowhere. She lunged at Marcos and, before he could react, slapped him as hard as she could. She was screaming furiously. "Who were those sluts you were with?" Marcos stepped back, shocked and angry. That's when I noticed that Beatrice had arrived in a car, and the driver was Raquel. I couldn't help shouting, "What the hell are you doing here?" But Raquel got out of the car, ignored my question, and also ignored Beatrice and Marcos arguing. Instead, she started talking directly to me. She told me she missed me, that she hadn't been able to stop thinking about me, that she didn't care who I was seeing because she knew it wasn't serious. Not like what we had. Before I could reply, Marcos got into his car and drove off. Beatrice ran back to the car she'd come in with Raquel, screaming at her to hurry because Marcos was getting away. That's when I realized they planned to follow him. Those two women were completely out of their minds. So I tried to buy time for Marcos to get away safely. I turned to Raquel and spoke calmly, but firmly, leaving no room for hope. I told her we were over, that everything was finished, and it was time for her to move on. I even reminded her, sarcastically, if she didn't have other options she wanted to explore. Raquel broke down again, like so many times before. She started crying, saying no, she hadn't been with anyone else, that I was the one she loved. Meanwhile, Beatrice kept honking the horn, screaming from the passenger seat for Raquel to get in already. I wanted to make sure there were no doubts, so I was very direct. "Raquel," I said, "I'm not interested anymore. I've moved on with my life, and you're not part of it. Do whatever you want, but you have no chance with me." After that, I got into my car and left. As I drove away, I could still hear Beatrice yelling like a lunatic from the car, ordering Raquel to get back in. And Raquel, in the middle of it all, stood there in the parking lot, crying like she didn't understand anything. Later, I called Marcos to tell him what had happened. That's when the big question came up. How did they even know where we were? We hadn't posted anything on social media or told anyone we were going out. Marcos found the answer the next day. He carefully checked his car and discovered a small device stuck underneath the rear bumper. It was a GPS tracker. I'm sure Beatrice, in her obsession, had planted it to follow his every move. When he told me, I wasn't even surprised. After seeing her show up out of nowhere in that parking lot, it was obvious something strange was going on. But at the same time, it gave me chills to think how far that woman had gone. Marcos is now trying to get a restraining order. I hope he gets it, because honestly, Beatrice is not mentally okay anymore. She crossed a huge line. The GPS thing isn't just a passing fit of craziness, it's real stalking. And as for Raquel, the only thing I hope is that she's finally understood, once and for all, that she has no chance with me. She let herself be dragged down by her friends' ideas, and now she's paying the price. If she has even a bit of dignity left, the best thing she can do is get away from Beatrice, because the only thing that woman is doing is sinking deeper and dragging everyone else down with her.